everybody. We have a great conversation coming up today about a man who healed himself from literally not just life-threatening, end-of-life diseases and paralysis through using spiritual concepts. His soul took the big deep dive and put himself on the edge so he could bring this message forward. But as he trips around out there, he also sees the nature of consciousness on the planet, and he says that this experiment in human free will is a raging success. This is RJ Spina. Before that, just to let you know, if you feel like supporting this work, you can go to Patreon and support it for those who can't afford to do that, and also people around the world. I give this away free. You can also sign up for my newsletter and find out what's coming up next. Okay, now to RJ Spina. RJ Spina, it's wonderful to see you here. I've been following some of your work, and I thought you'd be a wonderful person to have a conversation with at a fairly, in-depth level about what's going on in the nature of reality and why it is so important that our field of thought becomes clean and clear. And we'll get into a little bit of the mechanics without getting overly mechanical, but just to bring home what in wonderfully, wildly adventurous times we're in and how to cope with them. But first, you've had your own wonderfully wild adventure. And for those who don't know you, I'd love for you to go into what happened with you years ago when you were paralyzed, staph infection. You should be dead. You should be dead or paralyzed at best, but you're not, because you had your epiphanies and used spiritual principles that really worked. So let's talk about that, if you'll share that with everybody right now.
First off, thank you for having me on your show, Regina. I appreciate it.
You.
Great deal. Okay, so the exact date is April 23rd, 2016. So it's 8 years now, going on 9 years. Feels like it was yesterday, but 8 years going on 9 years. So I had been feeling very, very ill for a couple of months. Wasn't feeling like myself, was having trouble focusing. I was getting weaker. I could tell something was really wrong with me. And that day, April 23rd, 2016, I had such severe pain in my back that it became unmanageable. There's nothing I could do about the severity of it. It was the kind of level of pain, Regina, where you literally just going to start screaming because you can't handle that level of pain. It's like my mind was going to shut off. So we went to the ER, told them about this excruciating pain, and told them that I've been feeling sick for months, getting weaker and weaker. So while I was there, and they started doing an MRI on my spine, while I was there, I literally became paralyzed from the chest down. I actually felt everything kind of click off. Like I feel it literally like light switches going off down my spine. And then everything shut down from my chest down. And then about 15 seconds later, I passed out. I completely passed out. Now, I then woke up the next morning, about 3:00 in the morning. And of course I was still paralyzed. I remember touching my chest and my stomach, and I couldn't feel anything once I got past my chest.
Let me ask you one question. Let's talk about the emotional component of it. Were you in terror?
No. I mean, since I was a kid, if we go all the way back, I've been leaving my body. My earliest memories are of me leaving my body. That's the first thing I can remember in this lifetime, is me leaving my body. So I have been an explorer of consciousness and a teacher of meditation, consciousness exploration, enlightened metaphysics of the true authenticity of reality distillation. I've been teaching these things for a very long time. So I actually was completely and utterly calm, even though I was in absolute agony. Yeah. And just prior to the MRI, they had done some blood work and done some things like that. And they told me, by the way, that I had severe sepsis. They were shocked that I was lucid and or alive. I was diagnosed at that moment. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which is news to me. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's autoimmune disease, pancreatitis, thyroiditis. They said my heart had been retracted from the sepsis that was pushing down on my spine. It was almost sucking back my heart. I don't know if I said pancreatitis. And then I was also already starting to suffer from something called autonomic dysreflexia, which occurs on certain spinal injuries above T7 and T8. And that's exactly right around T7 and T8, which is exactly where my spinal injury was. And autonomic dysreflexia means your autonomic system doesn't work anymore. So what that means is your heart rate, your pulse, your breathing, your body temperature just is not regulated.
Everything's dysregulated.
Everything. I mean, I was 1 inch away from death, literally 1 inch away from death. And they told me, based upon the sepsis, that we have to have emergency surgery. They said they're hoping through the antibiotics and the surgery that I make it, but I might not live the next 48 hours. If I have a will, I should probably fill it out. So it was a plethora of maybe the most challenging news that you could probably get, 48 hours to live. And then the paralysis. So what happened was I woke up at exactly 3:00 in the morning. So they did the surgery. They did, Regina, something called a laminectomy. So this laminectomy by a fantastic neurosurgeon. This is in La Jolla, California. The laminectomy is where they essentially scrape the infection right off the spine. So right off. Now, the neurosurgeon announced to me that there was absolutely no way that I could ever recover. He's been doing this surgery for 25 years. The severity of what happened, the compression, the complete compression of my spine and his scraping. He said I would always be a paraplegic from the chest down. The other doctors came in and said I would never, ever be able to get off of medicine because the diseases that I was diagnosed with were chronic. And of course, they don't heal anything. They treat symptoms. So I was given a absolutely dismal prognosis, to say the least. I was alive, but other than that, it wasn't looking very good. When I woke up from emergency surgery, I woke up into what I now tangibly understand to be authentic cosmic consciousness, which is the actual total remembering of all past lives, access to everything. And in the ICU, I started explaining, and all this is documented. In the ICU with the nurse, I started explaining the metaphysics of self-healing and self-realization, and that they are a repeatable process. It's a science once you understand how to do it. And I started giving her specifics of the healing, what I was going to do, which wound up making the crux of the healing technique that's in my first book. I started explaining all of this to her, and I absolutely announced to her and to everyone else that in 100 days, in exactly 100 days, I would walk out of here completely unassisted, and there would be no signs of any illness whatsoever, and I would be taking absolutely no medications. So 2 things occurred at that moment. One, she looked at me like I had 20, not 3 heads, 20 heads. But the other thing was I was so specific that she couldn't dismiss it. It wasn't just like rambling, like I'll just embrace the light or so. It was nothing like that. It was ultra specific. And she said, RJ, how do you know this? And I said, I remember everything. And in exactly 100 days, I walked unassisted and I showed no signs of any of the illness, the sepsis, the type 1 diabetes, the Hashimoto's, any of it. And I don't take any medications.
That's a fantastic story. And every now and then we'll hear of these incredible reversals that happen on a physical level due to consciousness. Yours seems to have been a much more aware place you were coming from to begin with. With a lot of people, they're in a car crash and you know how it goes. I've heard so many of those stories, and then they're not expected to live. They have no idea. Someone comes and sits at the end of their bed, boom, you're going to live. So yours wasn't like that. Yours was very conscious and you were very aware, which is absolutely fascinating. So did you on a soul level choose this experience for this very reason, so you could be here now sharing this information with people?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my last name is Spina, which actually means spine. So what a coincidence, right? So we all plan these things out. Mine might be dramatic or however we want to label that, but we all absolutely plan these things out. And part of my life plan was absolutely to get so severely ill and literally be still here temporarily housed within a body that's been completely and utterly destroyed, given no blueprint, no game plan on how to put it back together, because I knew that challenge was what it is that I desired and required in order for me to go so deep within myself, to call upon the reservoir and love and wisdom that I actually am, and to prove to myself yet again that I could put a destroyed body back together and then be the walking embodiment of these teachings, and then therefore share all of this with humanity.
Beautiful. You're on your path, big time Dharma. And it's interesting because you had to take yourself to the edge in order to be able to have the authenticity and credibility to even do this.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I had been talking about these things, not to that level of clarity, but I had been talking about these things for a very long time. And I think if I didn't have paralysis and all these kind of things, which is totally documented, there's videos, this is not a story. I think if I didn't have this, and then let's say I continued to teach the things I teach, I think a lot of people would be like, wow, well, that's really fascinating. But it might be theory, it might be this, it might be that. Mm-hmm. I don't deal with theory, I don't deal with beliefs, I don't deal with concepts. This is actually how it works.
That's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because you're the real deal. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people out there who pass on knowledge and repeat from what they've learned from others, and that's good. We all do it. We're all learning all the time, but yours is grounded in your own personal experience and understanding that you've brought through from lifetimes. And so it's golden. So as far as the physical healing aspect of it, you've written about this, you have this on your website, you teach these methods. So that's all there for people who want to go and start looking into how they can start working on this miraculous journey of self-healing themselves. But you also have a lot to say about the field at large and what's going on in the mindscape of the field. And right now it is November 4th, 2024 in the U.S. Tomorrow's a big day, although we may not have any answers tomorrow. It's a big day. So we're dating this a little bit, and by now, when everyone watches this, we'll already see some of that outcome. But the interesting part to me is what's happened to the field. And I'll just share a little meditation I had a couple weeks ago, that because the mass emotions around the planet right now, this is not just US, this is everywhere, are so inflamed and are starting to tear people apart and become so divisive that we're entangling with Earth's own emotional field. And this has its own consequences. The Earth has her own multidimensional body. Mm-hmm. And now I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you've noticed and seen in the field at large with this going on. And if you have seen anything regarding how the Earth is beginning to respond to the entanglement. I know we're seeing a lot of disasters everywhere, and I think some of it can be down to that. So I want to get your take on the entanglement of Earth first with what we're experiencing emotionally.
What a great question. Okay. So, and yes, I'm right there with you in terms of what's going on. And Earth, from my direct experience, is what I call a pan-frequential being or consciousness. And what that means is that Earth exists. There are versions of Earth that exist where we are, which is the third frequency. Energy exists in frequency, not dimension. So I always like to bring that up. So just like your phone operates on certain frequencies, your radio on certain frequencies, energy exists in frequency. Energy does not exist dimensionally. Dimensions house frequencies. So we're in the third frequency. Now, Earth exists. There's a version of Earth, obviously, the version that you and I are speaking in regards to. There's a version of Earth in the third frequency. There's a whole other version of Earth in the fourth frequency. And then another one in the fifth and the sixth and the seventh, all the way up to the 12th frequency. So Earth is a pan-frequential being, and we can actually experience these versions of Earth in the same way, as an analogy, in the same way if you had a radio and you were listening to 95.5 and you wanted to listen to what was going on 96.5. So what you would do is you would take the dial and turn it up. Now, when we change through meditation, when we change the electromagnetic frequency of our brain, we can actually tap into these other versions of Earth. And and as you said, Earth exists as what I call pan-frequential. So they're all there. Okay. when we talk about what's going on here, I always try to reduce things down to it's almost as if we're sitting at the core of the miracle machine where everything else is projected outward and therefore downstream. So I like to go right to what the core is. What I see as the core is this whole ascension. We're looking at the difference between lower consciousness and higher consciousness. We're looking at the reactionary mind, which has its attention on something. And then that attention is your energy, because where your attention goes, your energy flows. So what we are doing is we're using the reactionary, finite, lower consciousness mind to put our attention outward instead of dwelling within, as for, and by the self, because what you put your attention on grows. So if we put our attention upon the self would grow, self-awareness, which would then lead to self-realization if we continued that. So instead, we are prompted at every moment, including the spiritual community and CNN and everywhere else, to put our focus outwardly on what's going on. Now, what that does is first off, it lowers our frequency. That's the number one thing. It lowers our frequency. We are also now creating our mental and emotional state from the lower consciousness rather than creating from the higher mind, which is the unlimited potentiality, which has nothing to do with the past or future. So from my perspective, we are actually doing, and we're, for the most part, taught this on every channel that you can turn to, including spiritual channels. We're being taught this backwards. We're reacting. We're taking in information. We are not informed. We are influenced. We're taking in information, reacting to information, which keeps us low frequency, which is why we have this division, which is why we have people that are going to lose their mind. They have to argue with one another because they can't step back because they're not detached. And therefore, they're not detached. They don't have any clarity. And without that clarity, we can't create the reality that we most desire from the unlimited self, or the I am, which everything comes from that. So what we're seeing, to me, and this is what ascension is, this goes back to the story of Cain and Abel. That's what this is. From my direct experience, this goes back to Cain and Abel. This has to do with lower consciousness and higher consciousness, and Earth moving into the fourth frequency, not 5D. So tired of hearing that. It's not accurate at all.
You and me both. I have to tell you, I mean, your words are like beautiful, cool water, because we're, my friend, in 100% lockstep on everything. Continue, please, this 5D thing versus fourth dimension. Appreciate it.
Yes. So this is more spiritual fiction. Just like you said, this is more someone heard it somewhere, sounds good, and they repeat it. No tangible truth is going on here, just regurgitation. That regurgitation, again, is the lower consciousness focusing outward, taking in it and repeating it, therefore not creating anything authentic. So what we're starting to see is this shift. We're starting to see the shift of people pulling back from this. Hopefully they will relax, and not from a heightened state of emotionality, because what your attention is upon grows. And from a heightened state of emotionality, what we're actually doing is building this dystopian timeline of chaos, madness that everyone is promoting. And why is everyone promoting it? Because fear sells. It's good for subscribers, clicks, and ad revenue. That's why the spiritual community is also doing it. And second, if I may say so, most of them also do it because they themselves don't have anything authentic to share. So they have to have someone else come on there who channels and is a psychic and this and that, regurgitating the same doom and gloom. So
true.
Yeah, we're seeing, I'm tired of it. We're seeing the difference between lower consciousness, reactionary mind, which is very limited, which is why we have choose this or choose this. I don't think so. So when we're starting to learn how to create from the infinite, from the ever spacious I am, and once we start to do that, the outer world will reflect that we're creating from this infinite space rather than the lower consciousness, which is finite based upon only what the five senses have taken in. And that's the data stream that actually creates the intellect. And therefore, we're creating from a limitation program. And we're seeing the split between these two things.
Okay, here. I couldn't agree more. Every single thing you said. Like I said, we are in lockstep and probably need to have several conversations in order to begin covering all this. But I'm flowing with what you're saying, and we're talking about what happens when we're reaching into higher and lower frequencies and what we're creating, either by default or by intention. And right now it's being created, as you said, by default, running on programs, fear, and influencing. So One of the areas I find particularly interesting is within these dimensional realms and frequency ranges, we're always very happy to hear, oh, I connected with my guides and I can see my angels and they love me and everything's wonderful. But when we're in these really low frequency ranges of thought and emotion, we are as easily influenced by the dimensions and realms below. We're sandwiched between entities and beings and energies above and below. We're happy to align and claim our place with those above. But we've been engaging a lot in mass, a lot of energies below where the earth human lives. Please talk about that and what really the problem that brings with it at this period in history when we really need to break through and create.
How I see it, Regina, is attention outwardly focused. Okay. And this comes from wanting or needing answers or trying to figure things out, which is the finite mind. Now, the reason why that mind, the finite mind, the lower consciousness, the ego mind identity, the reason why that mind constantly wants more and more information, constantly researching, constantly watching, because it doesn't authentically know anything. That's why it's ravenous for information. That finite mind is bankrupt of truth and bankrupt of gnosis. And so we have to actually start to do the opposite. I mean, otherwise, we're just moving furniture around in the same room.
Yeah.
So we are constantly influenced. Constantly. We think we're informed, but actually we're just simply influenced. And if you can, what I call perception management. So if you can control, for the most part, if you can control what the five senses can pick up, then you can completely control the mind of a species, humanity, of a species that is only using their lower mind or their lower consciousness to exist and create their reality. So this is why humanity keeps going on these rides, because we are not stepping back, total detachment, discernment, because when we're present, our inner guidance system turns on and truth will resonate. And that's the only way that we can actually know the difference between one person says this, sounds good. The next person comes up and says, oh, that sounds good too. And well, that's just pleasing to the mind. That's all that is. But that detachment turns on the inner guidance system and then truth resonates. And then we have to build, create, and live from that. This is the shift that's actually happening. It's lower consciousness and higher consciousness. And like I said, this actually goes back to Cain and Abel. That's what that story is actually really about. Lower consciousness and higher consciousness.
And in the eyes of many, particularly in spiritual communities, there's a belief that you have to escape, that you have to go beyond the physical realm to be able to acquire that kind of sensitivity, where here we have the most divine tuning fork in the world, this physical body and the aura that supports it. I mean, this is a mechanism that other species are absolutely fascinated with. The way that our multidimensional being connects with this physical, third, arguably going into fourth now, dimensional body. All truth is known in every cell in the body. And we tell ourselves, you have a stomach ache. No, let me meditate. Let me talk to my guides about this. So let's talk about how it is, what real everyday enlightenment and truth seeking and truth finding really means.
I have a very different take on this.
Okay.
So let's speak about enlightenment for a moment. Okay. So enlightenment is the easiest thing in the world because it's the only thing here and now. And once that has become normalized, the connectivity and the communion, because it is all one thing, the connectivity and the communion actually, just like water keeps spreading until you pour it into something. So if you don't pour your consciousness into any belief, concept, or ideology, what will happen through self-control and self-discipline, what will happen is that your consciousness will just keep doing this and it won't stop. And then therefore the knowingness becomes tangible because there's nothing outside of your consciousness. Now, the way that we were being taught is to reach outside of ourself. Excuse me.
That's what I'm speaking about. Yeah.
Right. Whether that's to guides, helpers, aliens, archangels. Okay. Anytime. I find it interesting, by the way, that no authentic ascended master ever talks about doing that.
Exactly.
I just think that's interesting. Okay.
I think it is too. Thank you.
Yes. So anytime anybody is in the act of reaching out, we are setting ourselves up to be abused and misused by the various types of energies, entities, and beings that exist that have their own absolute agenda. And if people don't like to hear that, that's okay. It's the truth. So when we learn to do the opposite, reaching out, I need to know because I have to ask my guides. I have to ask Archangel Michael. I have to ask the Arcturians. Okay, great. Well, I suggest we start doing the opposite. I suggest we go so far deep within the self, within the I am, and the image that is always in my head, and I don't know why, Regina, but the image that's always in my head is Clark Kent. He's got his business suit on, and then there's a problem, and he starts to, he rips the suit off, right? And there's the big S. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what I desire for humanity, is to stop reaching out, but to do this and go deeply within. And that's what the challenges that we give ourselves are actually for, like my own paralysis, to go so deep within, to call upon more and more of the I am. Now, when we call upon more and more of the I am, that's actually what evolution is. Because it's tangible, it's gnosis, it's a development of the self. It's not reaching out. Only the finite lower consciousness reaches out. And when we start doing the opposite, this is when we'll ascend rapidly.
I hope you're enjoying this video, because if you are, there are dozens more like it on my site, all supported by people like you. So if you'd like to keep this work rolling in and join our community, just click on the Patreon button at reginameredith.com. That also gives you access to insider commentary, my live book club, and other live events with special guests. So join in. Thanks.
This matrix right here has the truth. It's tapped into all truth. If we can just become sensitive enough to hear ourselves, to listen to ourselves. Now, that said, I talk to what appear to be guides sometimes, but I say appear to be. I say that it can be my own higher mind. Because ideally, what's happened with humanity, we've been so disassociated intentionally and manipulated away from clear contact with higher mind, that sometimes there is almost like a go-between of some kind that can help bring the two together, although we're perfectly capable of doing it ourselves, just through raising our frequencies into the range where we can easily connect with higher mind and have it speak to us. So I don't want to disregard the fact that there are other entities that we have help, that we may have guides that are keeping us, pulling us right out at the car crash site, and helping save our lives. I'm not denigrating that in any way. I agree with you that the truth now has to be found in here. In the end, we're not going to be able to discern truth from the outside, especially now with AI. It's too seductive. The manipulation has become too all-pervasive and subtle now. Very hard for a human to tell the difference if we're looking externally. So please, go ahead.
That is 100%. We're not going to be able to discern the truth from looking from the outside. Well said, Regina. And this is all a setup from my direct experience and perspective. This is all set up to force us to go with it. Mm-hmm. You can't tell the difference anymore. Just like you said, it's like, who the hell is telling the truth? What is actually accurate? But between AI, between deep fake videos, between the level of manipulation that humanity's consciousness is under 24/7, even in frequencies that exceed the 5 physical senses, we are bombarded since we incarnate here with what we'll call it the matrix. We are bombarded with the matrix. It has become impossible. You're so right. I love the way you said that, to be able to discern the truth from the outside. This was set up so that we must, we'll call it Clark Kented. So we must Clark Kented, go into more of the self. And that's what the only learning takes place when it's tangible. We can read, a silly example, but anyway, we can read tons and tons of books and watch tons and tons of videos endlessly on YouTube on what orange juice tastes like. You are never going to actually know what orange juice tastes like until you taste it for yourself. So all of this stuff about concepts and beliefs and reaching out is to me, that's the false light. That's what that is. And I think some people are waking up, even in the spiritual community. They're actually starting to waking up what you and I are talking about right now. The only thing that we can actually trust, the only thing that is actually true, the only thing that is actually eternal, the only thing that is whole and complete is the self. It is a fractal of God. It's lacking nothing. It misses nothing. It wants nothing. So when we Clark Kent it, all the questions stop, and the knowingness through intuition simply flows.
So beautifully said. So now let's talk about a subject that has, I think, been misunderstood a bit, and that is being truly present in the moment. Because to me, that is the great meditation. Mm-hmm. Meditation is to simply completely engage with what's in front of you that very moment. And of course, everything is designed to distract us from doing that, everything. And so most people go through their day having missed almost all the moments of their lives and the opportunities to engage with it. So I love how you talk about being in the moment. And after that, I'm going to share a really silly little dream, but it kind of shows it all and makes people laugh. So let's talk about the meditation, true meditation of being in the moment and why it's important now.
It's everything. Our entire quality of life is completely dictated by how present we can be. Because there's no quality of life when we're in our head and then identifying with those thoughts, which causes emotionality, because that's the identification with the thoughts. That's the energy in motion. By identifying the thoughts, that's what causes the emotionality. So there's no quality of life when we're thinking, and there's very little quality of life when we're emotionalizing. All quality of life is how present we can be. Now, I think out of everything, since I started teaching, literally 7 days a week for almost going on 10 years, the difficulty that people have with meditation. If I've heard, RJ, I have trouble meditating once, I have literally heard it 10,000 times, literally. And I've heard people say, I've been meditating for 17 years. I've been trying to meditate. I have to wear my headphones. Okay, let's turn this completely around. Okay, the self, what we actually are, is meditation. The self exists prior to thinking. The self exists prior to emotions. The self exists prior to the body, and therefore it exists prior to bodily sensations, prior to the incarnation itself. So what we are, the self, Superman, what we are, the self, is meditation. So what that means, it doesn't actually require an effort to be who and what you really are, which is meditation. Now, that alone shifts things for people when they start to hear the truth, because the truth always shifts everything. I've developed through, or remembered, or were given, which is all the same thing if you ask me, what I call instantaneous meditation magic tricks to break the spell of the ego-mind identity, which is past, future, past, future, past, future. Right? So there's a couple of things that we can do that instantaneously, and I really mean in 1 second, that makes us completely and utterly present. One of which is just pretend that you just arrived here. No past, no future.
Yeah.
That mind stops in 1 second. Total presence and clarity in 1 second. So this helps people tangibly understand that meditation is actually what we are. That didn't even require an effort. It didn't even require a second to do these things. Now, people are like, okay, well, that's great, but how do I maintain that, RJ? Like, I can do it for 1 second when I'm talking to you or whatever, but I'm busy. I got 3 kids. I got 2 jobs. Okay. Very simple, right? We're present. Pretend you just arrived here. No past, no future. Okay. We are now in meditation. We're completely and utterly present. Your beingness is now online. The matrix isn't. The beingness is now online. Take that beingness and let it flow into your doingness. Beingness into doingness. You never have to reach back for this thing. Past, future, past, future. So it's as simple as 1 second. You could also say to yourself, I don't know, and I don't care.
That's a good one.
Right? So now
But the ego has
metaphysical,
well, it's not even the ego. The mind has to give it up at that point. And the
right,
mind
right.
really needed to be in control.
You got it. You got it. Because the lower consciousness, the ego mind identity, is actually feeding on our consciousness and our body of energy. It's actually what it's doing. So
Yeah.
when we say, I don't know, that is literally wiping clean the mental body. I don't know, blank. I don't care, completely stops the emotionality. So it's like a lake with no ripples on it. So I don't know, clean. I don't care, flat. So again, a 1 second instantaneous meditation magic trick. And then from there, be simply in, just like you said, meditation is flow state. We are that flow. We are the life force. All we have to do is let that beingness flow right into the doingness, whatever that is. It doesn't matter. Doing the dishes, mowing the lawn, writing a book, having a conversation. Who cares?
Right.
Just the beingness into the doingness. It doesn't require an effort. All our effort is in trying to be something and someone that we're not, which is why we have to strain. So this is this flow state, and this is momentum. This is higher mind over lower consciousness. So it's as simple as doing an instantaneous meditation magic trick and then becoming completely and utterly engaged in whatever it is that you're doing.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so now I'll share my little dream. And I share it because everybody was laughing. Someone was interviewing me last night, and I brought this up because we were talking about someone was living in a lot of fear, trying everything and saying, I feel like if I let loose of control, that everything is going to collapse. So we got into a conversation. So this is the little dream. It's quick. So it's before waking in the morning. I'm in an airplane because I'm in airplanes a lot. The airplane's going down. And so my first thought is, there's nothing. In this one, there was nothing I could do about it. I thought, crap, it's almost over. It's just like, I'm not done yet. And then the next thought was, okay, you only have a few seconds left. So you're going to crash. Everybody here is going to die. That's how this is going to end. That's okay. That screen goes dark then. Well, in this dream. So why don't you see what it feels like to free fall without a parachute? And so my whole being was like, okay. And I was just enjoying the feeling of the free fall, which you don't get to experience in real life. Certainly not without a parachute. And so that's where the dream ended. And I knew that there would be this stage at the bottom where it's all over. But I was going to just enjoy the seconds I had left and be in the moment. And to me, that was one of those, I have strange dreams, but that was one of those perfect in the moment kind of dreams.
Yeah, you weren't in resistance and you weren't reaching for something else. You were in complete flow with whatever it was that was going on, and therefore you were actually able to experience joy.
Yeah.
Even in a plane crashing.
Yeah, exactly. Woke up, I was just laughing because I've had other similar kind of dreams, defying gravity, shut in a room with no doors, and an animal, a predator, and things like that, where I have to go into calm and communicate and, make everything turn out okay. So that's just a little example in dream time of being in that pattern. But one of the things you talk about, and we're going to shift here, I love, because it's one of my very favorite topics I think about a lot, and I'm writing a little book on free will. I've heard you say, let me get the exact words. This free will experiment is a raging success. I love it. So I would love for you to talk about your perception of free will and why it's such a success.
This goes way, way, way down the rabbit hole. But as you know, Regina, I speak about what I tangibly know to be true through my own tangible experiences, not what I heard someone say or read or anything. I don't even think I've read a book in about 10 years. So I don't want anything seeping into my subconscious. We have to look at humanity. Okay. Human beings, which is a suit. No one is actually the suit, just like no one's actually an alien. No one's actually a human, right? We are the I am that is temporarily being projected within a certain vehicle to experience certain things, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Humanity is actually an experiment, and it is the experiment, an individualized free will. Now, as strange as this sounds, no other highly sentient species has individualized free will. So there is slightly lower sentience levels that operate in a hive mind. You can think of I'm not talking about specifically ant, but in terms of hive mind, you can think of insects operating in a hive mind. Okay. So there are beings that have a hive mentality that are not quite as sentient as in general the human race is. But oddly enough, there are other species, and these we would probably call aliens from our perspective, even though we're not from here either. We're all aliens.
Right, exactly. We're all hybridized visitors. Yeah.
Literally. Yeah. So there's other species, and we'll call them aliens for intents and purposes of the conversation. And they are quote unquote more advanced. Maybe they're existing in the fourth frequency or fifth frequency, et cetera. Right. So they're not quite as underwater as we are. So, but they're more advanced, but they still, through my own exploration, they are still, oddly enough, they're still operating with a form of hive mind.
Yes.
They don't have complete autonomy the way that a human being does.
Yeah.
Now, which is at least interesting to me, that human beings are the only one, which is why we are of such interest.
That's why I'm so fascinated with it myself, because we are being studied, watched to see how this experiment, this experience of mass free will, how does this story end?
Oh, yeah.
What do we transform into, right? Other species, I am absolutely fascinated with the notion of free will and the fact that it's so unique to this place. Continue, please.
Yeah. So the very idea behind the creation of humanity is the experiment of individualized free will. So really, what does that mean? It means it portends the greatest efficacy of consciousness because everyone gets to evolve in their own way and in their own time. Which the idea behind it, the original idea behind it, from my direct experience, the original idea behind it is that we would be able to skyrocket in terms of our evolution because nothing and no one is holding us back. So every temporarily individualized unit of consciousness can actually just explode with its own self-realization and its own growth. Now, humanity is the tangible or physical representation of this individualized free will project. Now, if we start to look at, and many beings have or can, and there are many people incarnate right now in our timeline that have the ability to do this. But if we simply access the Akashic, and the Akashic is really being able to, newsflash, being able to completely and utterly go through your subconscious.
That's all it is.
That's all it is.
Subconscious. I know. So much is made of this, and the subconscious is so misunderstood. Thank you. I don't want to interrupt again. I'm just very excited to be speaking with you.
So if we start to access, and by the way, my second book is, from my perspective, the Bible and how to deprogram everything that's in your way in terms of your limitations. The second book, that's why I wrote that second book, to remove all of that. Okay, the limitations. The Akashic can simply be accessed. Anyone can do it. You can't do it with your lower consciousness, but anyone can access their subconscious, the totality of their subconscious. With enough self-control and self-discipline, and when we're taught properly, anybody can do it. The inner mechanics are universal. Okay. The subconscious will reveal, because it is actually the history, which means the start and the finish.
Library. It's
the whole thing. So what does that mean? It means it's already happened.
Yeah.
It means, and it's already a raging success. I'll take it further. Earth was, or has, or is, however you want to. There is no past, present. But anyway, Earth has been and is reserved for the individualized free will experiment or humanity. Now, I can tell you unequivocally that we master the free will experiment. It is a raging success. And once that is done, what's actually going to happen, believe it or not, is Earth will then open up. Humanity will no longer quote unquote exist. And Earth will open itself up to a whole other species of beings, just like we were talking about before, the hive mind. It'll open up to a whole other species of beings, and they're actually going to enjoy this planet, and they're going to run their version of the individualized free will experiment. And it's those that have been humans before are going to end up being their guides and helpers because they have mastered this.
Yeah.
So the only reason why, from my perspective, my bizarre perspective, the only reason why we have trouble accessing these things. One, we're using the wrong tool, which is the lower consciousness, which is only goes outward. You have to go inward. So that's the wrong tool. It's like stitching a blanket with a knife. That's never going to work. It just cuts and divides. We're looking for the totality of things. But if we start to realize that it's already been accomplished, we can all just relax. We can all just relax a little bit. You won't be reaching out for answers. You won't be frenetic. You won't be over emotional. You won't be in your head. It's already accomplished. We've all done it. It's just like when you get a book, right? And if you open up that book to page 77, doesn't matter. You open up the book to page 77, right? And you look at the first words, top paragraph, first sentence, right? And you read it, right? Okay. We don't know anything about this book because we've only opened up to page 77 and we're only reading one sentence because that's what our attention is on. So we don't know anything that happened in the first 77 pages, and we don't know anything that happens in the next 77 pages. So there's no way to actually appreciate this entire book. But yet that book has already been written, even though you're holding it in your hand. To get the fullness and the depthness, which is really evolution, out of it, you have to put your attention on every word of every sentence, of every paragraph, of every page. And then you'll realize that the book was always written, but it's just where our attention is upon, and that everything has already been accomplished, just like the book was already written. This is already a success, Regina. But
I agree.
Our attention.
People don't see it that way. So many people think our problem is our free will. No, that is our saving grace and our beauty as a species.
You got it. It's just that we can only experience this one moment within one timeline, within one version of Earth, within one frequency. Meanwhile, the totality is all right there and it's already been accomplished. But the lower consciousness can't access it. And that's why the lower consciousness is constantly reaching out to hear from some psychic or some channel that would give them some kind of answer instead of learning how to go within and realizing that the whole thing is already a success, including the self. The self is a success. It's a fractal of God. It's whole and complete. It's missing nothing. All we have to do is put our attention upon it.
Okay, well, there is every place to go still, and we can't go every place. I love what you just had to say. What I'm going to do is just toss a couple things out on a very practical level, because you and I are in a complete agreement. This is a frequency game. That's all it is. There isn't anything but that throughout the universe. Mind, desire, presence, interfacing with the field, the soup, the prima materia, that's creating all of this. We're creating all of this. So because it's a frequency game and our frequencies are very deeply tied to and generated by thought and feeling and emotion, it seems to me we can reduce this in a way to some simple tenets. I think the Earth is becoming, yes, there's some stuff going on, but en masse, human beings at large are becoming more connected, and we're becoming more compassionate and more caring, generally speaking, as a species. So I would say, this is how I would say it, and please share in your way. If there's a single tenet, such as the notion that takes us to a lower frequency range, would be if one delights in the pain or suffering of another. That's a super low frequency. Mm-hmm. And with the pain and division going on right now, people are being dragged into wanting to see others suffer. This isn't cool. This is not who we are as a species now. So the opposite side is this care and generosity and willingness to hear one another out, even if we don't agree. Just be there. Give each other our full presence. To me, to love someone is to give them my full attention. Mm-hmm. So tell me your version of these simple little tenets at what it means to lower our frequencies or raise our frequencies so that we can start doing this together, individually and in mass. Simple.
Another great question. Okay. If we all do what we tangibly know to be true and expect no results, there will be love and freedom abound. Okay. Now, when I say, do what you tangibly know to be true. Okay, so the ego mind is like, well, tangibly know to be true. The ego mind, there is no tangibility. It just memorizes. There's nothing there. Okay, do what you tangibly know to be true. Okay, I'll give an example, a very human example, right? So if someone asks for my help, in regards to anything, but whatever that may be, RJ, Kenya, XYZ. And by me saying yes, I tangibly know to be true that I feel more like myself when I am giving and sharing. I tangibly know that to be true for me, that when I act or behave or live that way, that feels right to me, that I'm being authentic to who and what I am.
Yeah.
Now, that's what I mean by tangibly, not some belief or concepts or
Mm-hmm.
ideology or role. I'm not talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the expect no results, that's the real challenging part, because the ego mind is always looking for a result because it's always in a past or future. Okay. So if we do what we tangibly know to be true, and we can use that example, and we expect no results, what that means is we are free to continue in the perpetual act of creation at the highest level, because we're not stopping and looking for a result, which takes you out of flow.
Agreed.
Right? Now,
Yeah.
Here's the part, Regina, that I think is also worth mentioning, just in regards to, because to me, that's the simplest thing in the world to do, to operate that. Do what you tangibly know to be true and expect no results. Perpetual flow state, and the best of you is online 24/7. Simple. Okay. Caring versus compassion. So I sometimes talk about this. Okay. Caring. As weird as this sounds, just hear me out. Okay. We have to stop caring. I'll explain. We have to stop caring. Okay. Because metaphysically, now these eyes can't see this, but the higher mind and the third eye can see it easily. When we care, that means we have a vested interest in a specific outcome.
Well said. That is
This,
well said.
this is disempowering. This is so caring, stop. That's why one of those meditation magic tricks, I don't know and I don't care.
Yeah.
Okay. Compassion and caring have nothing to do with each other. We may use them interchangeably, but that's because metaphysically we don't really understand the difference. They're polar opposites. Compassion is just what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Fully present, all of my attention here now. That's all of your love, all of your wisdom, all of your forgiveness, all of your power is online only when you're fully present. That's compassion. And now look at compassion compared to caring. They don't even feel the same. The caring is, I'm worried about a future.
And thank you, because we have this kind of sloppy conflation of these words. And so I really appreciate the fact that you brought that up. Absolutely.
Yeah, that will liberate us. Stop caring about anything. I know that sounds weird, but now that we understand
No, it makes sense.
Stop. Be fully present all the time. Your compassion flows from presence. Everything flows from the I am presence, including your forgiveness, your love, your power, your wisdom. Everything flows from that. The difference between caring and compassion will move us from the third frequency to the fourth frequency.
Yes. Beautifully said. I love your work. I love your ability to articulate these themes in such a clean and clear manner to everyone. There are many more things we would have talked about had we had a few more hours. But what I'd like to do is, do you fly? Do you travel?
Yes, I do. Well, in a plane.
Yeah, in a plane. Oh, in a plane. All right, because I'm going to invite you to come on Gaia with me, then I can give you a big hug in person too.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Thank you so much. That would be absolutely wonderful.
We'll have our next conversation at Gaia in Boulder, Colorado.
Oh my God, that'd be great. I'm there.
Okay, good. RJ, I just want to again thank you so much. And if there's any one final thing you have to say in the height of these very emotionally elevated times before we say goodbye, please share.
I talk about detachment. We talked about that a little bit today. We didn't go too far into it. So detachment. What does that mean? What is detachment? That means you don't care and you're cut off and you're unloving. It's the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Let me talk about first what an attachment is. An attachment is anything that you identify yourself with. So if you identify or attach to a belief, a concept, a role, an ideology, a person, an event, etc. Okay. Think of Spider-Man, another silly visual, but think of Spider-Man shooting his spider web to some building or whatever, right? Okay. So he's now stuck to that building. Where is he going? Nowhere. Okay. When we have an identification or an attachment, we are weakening ourselves energetically because it is your energy that you're using. to stay attached and identify. The more attachments you have, the weaker you are. Now, for us to realize our full potential and our power, we have to detach from what is going on. You can think of that as observer mode, just watching. We've all watched a boring movie before. We don't care. There's that whole caring thing. We don't care what happens, right? We are unaffected by what is going on. This is what I want for humanity moving forward. I want you to watch the show, because it's just a show for your attention.
Yep.
Watch the show from a very detached perspective and realize no matter what is going on, it's got nothing to do with you. Now, if you watch from a detached perspective, you're actually going to start to feel better, because what's going to occur is your energy that you've been used to identify and attach to everything is going to start to come back to you. And once we have all of our energy and our mind is clear, we can actually create whatever reality we desire, but only through detachment. I like to say detachment is king and queen. And if we work on detachment, everyone is going to start to realize this for themselves tangibly.
Hear, hear. It's been absolutely delightful spending this hour with you, RJ. I look forward to seeing you soon, maybe in January even, in Boulder. And meanwhile, thanks for all the wisdom for getting through these times that people are tripping through right now. I mean, literally tripping through with some of the best, most clear, sage advice that's out there. I really, truly appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to seeing you in Boulder.
Oh, yeah, that'll be fun. Meanwhile, the new book, Access Superconsciousness, right?
Yeah, Access Superconsciousness, real quick, is 24 otherworldly understandings. I call them 12 eternal truths and 12 tenets of self-mastery. So there's 24 otherworldly teachings. Each one of them has an accompanying meditation so everyone can tangibly experience the depth of those truths. So it is prescriptive. Everything I do is prescriptive. So you get this grand teaching and a meditation so there's 24 meditations in that book. And through that meditation, you'll have the tangible experience of what that teaching actually is.
Very good. Okay, my friend, thank you so much. I will meet you soon. And thank you for spending the last hour with us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Regina. Thank you.
Again, you can find RJ at ascendthefrequencies.com. Check in with his work, his courses. We just talked about the book a little bit, and pretty soon you'll be able to see him with me on Gaia as well. Until next time, thank you for joining us here on reginameredith.com. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you might also want to consider joining Patreon, which allows me to keep all of this content free and available to everyone. And if you're looking for like-minded souls, you might also enjoy my online community called Our Neighborhood. Links to join are in the description.